Hello, everybody. My name is Gary O'Driscoll. I work for a company called Applied Materials, and today I am going to be presenting on using Workflow Builder, the conditional prompts, to monitor atomic layer deposition gas line temperature limits, and how we can use Workflow Builder to do this, especially in prompts for jump 18, where the application came in jump 18. So a little bit of information about myself. As I said, I work for Applied Materials in Dublin. I'm a process engineer that covers multiple processes, and I have almost 30 years of semiconductor experience. For hobbies, I do cycling, I play golf, and I am also I coach camogie. It's a sport in Ireland, and it's an adult ladies team. Camogie, and in the men's it's called hurling. If you have ever been to Ireland and you've heard about the wild game where we play with sticks, this is it, and that's what I coach. So a quick poll about maybe who uses JSL. If we look at JSL and there's all the users, how many people really are a user of JSL? And it comes into two camps. You're either on the yes side, where JSL is really a part of your role. You love JSL, and maybe I'm a code expert and I use it every day. But also on the no side, it's JSL is not part of my role. I don't understand code and I've never used it. And from me personally, I'm in the no side. I do not really understand the code. But sometimes I try to learn a little bit as I go along. But there is a way of actually getting from maybe the no and getting nearly to the middle and nearly jumping to the yes. And part of that I will show you today. So in Jump 17's launch, which we can remember back in Cary in North Carolina at the Discovery Summit, Workflow Builder was introduced. And workflow is actually, if you think about it, it's where we record actually what we want to do with data manipulation, but it actually helps flip the relationship between code and output. From a JSL point of view, we develop the code to give us the output we need. With a Workflow Builder, we actually have the output, we manipulate the data we want, and there's a code generated in the background. So workflows allow a user to experience and learn JSL code without any prior knowledge. If we look at the builder itself, what we can actually see is that in the builder, I will create my own tasks that I want to do from the manipulation. And in the step settings in Workflow Builder, you can actually see that the code is actually generated in the background from every little task that I want to do. The workflows are actually they're used for repetitive tasks. They really improve efficiency so that you're not doing the same thing over and over again. And the code for the workflow is viewable and editable. And so if I was actually trying to do this for myself, and especially when I started with Workflow Builder, what I actually found was that the file that I wanted to pick, I would pick the first file or the actual file I needed, and the name was in here, but not every time would I want to use that file. So tweaks in the code, I can do it here, but where I learned maybe a lot of things to say, how do I pick a generic file? I got all of that from the Jump community. And when you're actually going into code for the first time, like the problem you have, it's not the first time the problem is being seen. Someone has already, in the Jump community, has already solved this problem and actually has shared the code in the community. Then when we think about Jump 18 launch, so Jump 18 was launched in Manchester in Europe at the Discovery Summit. And there we heard about the 6 Ps. But actually on top of them, there was a 7th P that was included in Jump 18 that I heard of after the summit. And that P was prompts, or conditional prompts in Workflow Builder, to be more precise. So how I use the prompts and the conditional prompts in my role. So I will go through what, why, and how that I actually do this in my role. So what I am doing, I am checking temperature settings for fault alarms and alarm warnings on atomic layer deposition, or ALD for short, chamber gas lines, probably from or following from preventive maintenance tasks. Why? Am I doing it because any temperature shifts not captured by alarms could result in scrap of product? And the how is I'm checking the settings using the enhanced workflow builders that use conditional prompts. So ALD, for those that are not used to it, ALD is used in many applications across all of our industries. It's a process to deposit material directly onto the surface, a monolayer at a time. And it produces the thinnest, most uniform films possible in a self-limiting nature. So examples of this are across our industries are, I would have coatings on vials from labs, chemical and biomedical. I would have coatings on medical devices, and actually layers in semiconductor device manufacturers. So inside the chip, there may be a layer. And this is where we use ALD across all of our industries. How it's used in the semiconductor industry, well, maybe the same as some of the other industries. I have a container that would actually have a liquid chemical, and it's used in the process. So chemicals are used in the process, but they're transported not in liquid form, in vapor form from a container to the chip surface in a vacuum chamber across a path. And in this case, it's a gas line. This is like a basic drawing of the whole chemical flow, but to give the concept, we would actually have multiple temperature heat pads across the whole path from the container all the way to a chamber on the chip surface. And the chip surface, it's what I'm showing here is a representation of one chip. But in semiconductors, we have multiple chips across, like on one substrate or wafer in a chamber, and we deposit on that. So the heat pad limit settings need to be checked after every container change. Cold spots, as I said on the line, would cause maybe a gas to condense, causing defects on the chip, because a gas condensing potentially, but it's cooled, it condenses, and it's back in liquid form. It may dry out and actually then come back in actually in a solid form and actually deposit on the chip and cause an issue. So the old method from the settings that I did, and the settings check on multiple chambers. So if you think about it one way, what I did, I had one workflow builder if I wanted to look at it, one chamber. If I had two different chambers that I wanted to look at, I would have another workflow builder. And similarly, all the way up, the diagram here only shows up to 6 chambers, but there could be more and more chambers on top of that. And the old method was I would have a file, depending on what number of chambers I would use, I would select that, and that's how I would run. But if we go back to prompts, so with Workflow Builder, there's now a feature that allows us to actually maybe not just select one, but I can give a prompt to say, well, instead of having 6 separate ones, combine them all into one. And in Jump 18, in the Workflow Builder, you can see that we have a section in Advanced. And then when we go into Advanced, we get another menu. And inside all of these, you can actually see that these 4 here, the add if, add else, add return, and add for each. These are the ones that were actually, they allow us a step to branch off. So it's not just one path. I can go one path or another way, depending on what I input. And this is the new part, the new feature that was actually in Jump 18, and this is where I'm using it. I'm sorry. So to give you some idea of the new method, so I would start. So this is from a flowchart point of view. I would start, and then I would get a prompt, and I would say, am I using one chamber or one chamber? If yes, I would run my workflow, and I'd get a report, and I'm finished. But if it's not one, if my prompt was not one, it would move on, and then say, okay, is it 2? Yes, would run that one. If not, move on. It would continuously check for each of these, then depending on the number, it would check of what I put in on my prompt. And then whichever one it matched, it would actually run that report for me. So the new method is embedded if else false or if else statements within a larger workflow. And so this is my method. As I'm also saying, I do not know JSL. This is how I came up with this concept and how it works for me. There may be other methods out there, but this is my method. So allow me now to show you on a demo. So if I was to go the old method, I would have maybe a 4-chamber check. And in my check, I would say, I want to check the file. I would like to then, from the file that I wanted to check, I would generate the data table and I would save that as a jump file. I would open up my golden file. So I'm checking limits against a golden set of limits. So that because when we were doing a preventive maintenance, sometimes you widen the limits. If I'm cooling something down, then my limits are, if say, for example, I had something at 200 degrees, I cool it down to 20 degrees. My limits may be actually very tight in relation to the 200 degrees, but because I've cooled it down, it's outside that tolerance. So it's giving me constant alarms. And so a lot of people will widen the limits while you're actually doing the preventative maintenance task. So after you are finished that task, you would narrow your limits again. And that's what this is looking for, is in your golden file, have the limits being set back up to where they really need to be. So I would have my golden file. I would actually save that into a table and join them. And then depending on the columns, I would match up. I would look at, are they all correct? Now for say, in this case, it's 4 chambers. And where they do not match, I would then generate a subset table. And from there, I would, in a launch distribution, and say, okay, well then, what heat pad, what controller, what category would it be? And I would have multiple workflows. As I said, I would have one for a 1-chamber, a 2-chamber, a 3-chamber, 4-chamber, 5-chamber, and 6-chamber, and so on, all the way up. So what I've done is I actually combine them all so that I don't have to select an individual one anymore. And so what I actually did in the prompts, and so what you can actually see here in, actually before I do that, so let me run this. And so what it would do is in jump 18, I would actually go to my files. I would say I want to check, say, a 4. I would go open, this would all run. What do I want to save it as? I'll say a 4-chamber, save it. I'm just over saving the one I have. Looking for the golden file. It's going to save that wherever I want. And I can save these, as I said, I can select on my folder, wherever it is. And this will actually generate everything I need. So on a 4, it would say, okay, I have, as you can see here, say I have 2 issues on heat pad 2. It all comes from controller 2, and one of them is a warning limit and a fault limit. Okay, and then it would generate a table of what they are, and what the values are still, what they're meant to be, and I would have my little report that way. But also, what I would do is, I would do a similar thing with a 6-chamber check. So then I came to my conditional prompts altogether. And as you can see now, the same file. So what it is I have it broken down is I will open my check file, I'd save it. I have my golden file in a CSV, I'll save it as a jump table. And then this is where I get to my prompts, okay? So what you can see now is I will actually ask it within the prompt to put in a message, and in the message, my message will say what chambers do I really want? And as you can say, if the answer is 4, it'll run this. So if this one's 4, else it'll move on. And then so in the else, I have embedded another workflow that might be for a 1-chamber, and then another embedded one inside the else. And then the next one, we keep moving down. So you can see that it's like each workflow is tabbing in over the whole thing. And so at the end, then I would actually have my charts and my report. And so that's how I'm using this. So if I was to go back to this, what I would then do is, so I open my check file again. And go, okay, this time I'm going to say select the 6. Tell me where do I want to save it, and I'm just going to say, okay, I want to save my check 6 here. I could be putting in a tool ID or a machine ID. I could actually, or I could say a process, depending on how I wanted to save my file. So I gave it that way that I always had the option that I just didn't have my table and tried to save it later. It would do it for me immediately. I would have 6 again. So I would say, yes, I want to save that as the golden file. And now this is where it's asking me, okay, how many chambers am I trying to compare? And in this aspect, I'm going to say 6 and say, okay. It's going to ask me, okay, I've run this a couple of times. So which file am I trying to use? I'll say check the 6. Okay, so it's ran in the background there, and as you can see through the whole thing, it's actually, depending on the prompts, it's skipping certain sections, and it's running those, and saying, okay, skipped. And what I can see is then I have all of my that's my other one. I have my files here, so my mismatches for this, you can see them are actually here. Sorry, I am trying to get to the. So you can see now I have my table actually showing all of my limits actually here. So it's basically saying from all my rows of my combined, but from my mismatches, I have 2 on this. From my mismatches across the others, I have them elsewhere. And so it would give me my full report, actually, depending on what I actually had, and run that for me. And so I would take, okay, my limits, if I go back to my mismatches for my 4, I would then go, okay, well then on this machine, I had 2 issues where my heat pad actually wasn't working properly. And I would have, okay, I've got 2. I know it's on heat pad 2. I know it's on controller 2. I know one is a fault limit and one is a warning limit. And then going back to that, I would have, okay, it was a lower warning and lower fault. I can see maybe what they were actually set to. You can see here, maybe they're set to 100 and -80, and really they should be -10, -80. And so I would go back then and we would actually fix them limits, and then everything's good. So for this, then it's just a check for me of checking that limits are back in the right place. It's not something that maybe is not being monitored. Like if I think of many customers that would be doing this, it's a lot of people don't want to monitor limits. There's enough actual set points and actually how temperatures are actually running will be fine. They're not going to be monitoring limits. So this is actually another check that I would do for me. So that's my demonstration. But from a summary, so workflow conditions can be very helpful combining several workflows into one larger flow with prompts. Prompts can be, for me, they were numeric, but there are other ones that can be character based. Take, for example, if I was in the chemical industry and I have 2 workflows, I could have a workflow that I'm working on acidic chemicals, or one where I have a base. And so I could then enter in my prompt and say, am I working on my acidic workflow or am I working on my base workflow? So you can use different characters, or actually I get to a task and I say, did this happen? Yes or no? And depending on that, I may actually just generate a report depending on certain results. As I've said, it's my solution. There are other solutions to my workflow that may be considered. But after I generated this, it's good to actually be able to study the JSL afterwards, and it can be a good teaching method. As I said, like if I go back now into my actual workflow, if I can find it. So if I was to go back on here, I have my tasks, as I said, for each one. So I can start learning JSL from what tasks I've actually created in my workflow. And maybe for next steps for me, it would be to add a prompt to at the end of my workflow. So as I said, maybe this was for a particular machine with a certain number of chambers on it. Maybe I have to do a second machine or a third machine, and maybe I'll add in another prompt. We'll say, well, how many do you still have to do another machine? Yes or no? No, I'll be finished. Yes. And I may loop actually way back into the start of the workflow again. And so that's another way I'm actually looking at it. So with that, then, if anyone has any questions, feel free to contact me in the community. And actually send your questions to me. As I said, my name is Gary O'Driscoll. My Jump community ID is G O'Driscoll. And so, yes, send me your questions. I will be happy to answer. Thank you.